Welcome to the Mystical Truths Podcast. This is Rebecca, and I'm really glad you're here. Let's unlock your world. In the last recording, I talked about how interesting I think it is that children remember past lives. And so I thought, why not talk next about what we do between those lives? Because once you begin to really get it, that life has to continue on after what we know to be physical, then the questions kind of creep in. Do we go somewhere? What's it like? What do we do? If it's really nice there, why do we even want to come here? And we have received answers. We've always been given answers. We're given what we can hear. And so I think that makes a good point. What we need to consider before we get into what we've gathered so far about what happens between lives is these 2 points. One, that we're told what we're ready to hear and what we're ready to comprehend. And that's individually and as a people. And number 2, how we translate what we're offered can really vary. Because we're not told words. We're receiving streams of thought. Streams of thought. And how we put words to those thoughts can vary by person. And it's not so much a conscious thing because you're often putting words on it as you're receiving it, but it still needs to be considered because as we're putting words to the thoughts that are streaming, whether we're channeling that information, whether we're under hypnotherapy or we're having a near-death experience, it's all being translated through or by the human brain and its conditioned thoughts and beliefs. Can we get out of the way enough to translate clearly? I bet you we can. I would call Esther Hicks one of the most clear neutral channels. She channels or translates for a group of souls she refers to or they refer to as Abraham. She's been doing it for quite some time and has gotten better and better over the years, of course. And I've never heard anything offered from that transmission that I would question or feel is off. But so we do have to consider, though, are we taking what's coming through and sort of putting our personal interpretation or our spin on that? And if we are, is it still as accurate? In the case of near-death experiences, people will see or experience what they can best receive and what is maybe most comfortable or comprehensible to them. In hypnotherapy, we're not so conscious, but we are still utilizing something about us and our level of understanding or in our belief system to put words on what we're remembering. So it depends on the person, on the situation, as to how completely accurate it is. And, like I've said before, we could all be wrong about all of this. But it's still fun to ask. And it's still fun to be curious and see what answers we get. And I always follow what makes a good feeling sense to me. If it feels true, if it feels accurate to me, I'm going with it. If it feels off, whether it's something I'm interpreting or I'm hearing somebody else interpreted, then I know there's some adjustment there that could be done, that we're not maybe choosing the best way of explaining it. And I think currently, we are in a rapid acceleration. We are in a rapid growth period. And I think we're ready to get a clearer picture and interpret more clearly than we ever have before. And there are more of us asking. There are more of us curious. There are more people translating and interpreting and having near-death experiences and wanting to remember in some fashion or another, or having past life recall. So to put answers to some of those questions that come when we start to realize, or when we do realize that there's more after this physical life. So let's start with those. And then I want to talk about some of Dr. Michael Newton's research. I think you'll find interesting. So first, from what I've gathered, to answer the question, do we go somewhere? We don't really go anywhere. That would be a physical thing. And when you leave this physical experience, obviously you're not physical. It's about energy. It's about vibration. It's about awareness. So even when we hear in non-physical, I'm going here and I'm experiencing this, it's got to be more an awareness type of thing than it is a space and time type of thing. So when we leave the physical experience here, that means we withdraw our focus from this physical body and this physical experience. Our focus is now 100% non-physical. And they say we can incarnate into more than one experience. We can have several experiences, whether that's an incarnation thing or not, at the same time. So we're better multitaskers than I think we understand at this point. So another question, is there a God? Well, that's kind of a yes and no thing. I mean, we see what we need to see or what was easier for us to see, but there's no clouds, there's no harps or gates or things. There's no a God on a throne that is dictating anything. There is a source of all that is, and we are a part of that. That is not male or female. That is pure positive energy, always. So another question people ask is, so what's it like in non-physical? It's pure positive unconditional love. I think the likes of which we have a hard time fully grasping while we're in the physical experience. But we'll get more into that. Is it the same for everyone? No, it's not the same for everyone. There are, or at least there seem to be some set parameters, but we always have free will around that. It's kind of like how gravity is what it is, but you have free will how you navigate with it. What do we do when we're not physical? That one's probably the most complex to answer. There's lots to enjoy, plenty of options, endless variety, and we'll get more into the specifics of that in a little while. Why do we come here and maybe come here again and again? Because we're intelligent, ever-expanding souls, and we love being on this leading edge of thought where creation is happening. We are eternally creating new thoughts and desires and expanding in ways that is really cool to do in a physical experience, and what we do here helps everything else. And then we wonder, so why can't we remember all that while we're here? Why can't we know that and be here at the same time? And I feel like that is, it just makes sense that we wouldn't want to have all of that, because we want to be able to focus here in this personality, in this life stuff that we've set up for ourselves, and focus without all of that sort of background knowledge. It's similar to how if you're playing a sport, you really want to be in the game. You want your head in the game. You want to be in your zone and playing that thing and not all the other things that you are or be or do. So you being in this physical experience right now is similar to that. All right, so let's get to it. Let's say you've had the life. It's over. You withdraw your focus. You're always happy to do that. Happy to come, happy to go, happy about all of it, really. And so this is where I'd like to get into the work of Dr. Michael Newton. He's retired. He was a therapist who would use hypnotherapy with his patients to maybe go back into a childhood experience that they could find useful to maybe heal something now. And long story short, he ended up finding out that some were sort of bouncing back into a previous life. So he investigated those and found that that was really true. They were remembering people who really did exist. And so one of his patients said, I kind of wonder what I do between lives. So, and he was already going against his grain. I mean, this wasn't what he ever thought he would get into in his profession. And it was certainly not how he was trained, but he was thankfully curious and allowed this past life recall to happen. And then thought, well, yeah, maybe we could ask those questions about what do we do in between lives. So he began taking patients to a previous death experience and then saying, so what's happening now? And what's happening now? And being a good therapist, he knew not to ask questions that would be leading to some type of an answer. Always an open-ended question, something that, would not suggest any answer. And he took fabulous notes over many, many years with many, many clients. He put all of this together, made 2 books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, if you want to read his material. And so I'm going to pick some of that out. There's a lot there. It's pretty technical, but I'm going to pick some of that out just so we can get an idea of what his patients remembered over the years. And again, we've got to look at this as the human brain is involved in this interpretation. So we may not have it all completely accurate, but I still think it's good meat to look at. So there are some similarities when people were leaving a life experience that he found. Some float around the body for a little while. They feel a pulling sensation, not a commanding one, but just a loving, gentle, suggestive pulling sensation away from the place of death. There's a relaxation and a curiosity. There's no fear. Some describe a euphoric sensation of freedom and brightness. Some feel disoriented at first, but that seems to lighten up and move on pretty quickly. The experiences that they remembered were all wonderful experiences. I remember one in particular that this person was remembering a life that he or she had, I forget which, in a previous life. In the previous life, this person was a man who taught the fear of God. He was a preacher, and he taught the wrath of God, the fear of God, and thought he did an amazing job of it. He was so sure God was going to just love him for all of the work that he did here in that fashion. And so when he withdraws his physical experience, the first thing he sees is his idea of the devil. And it just freaks him out. He's like, how could this be? There's no way I could go to hell. I taught the fear of God and the wrath of hell and all that stuff. There's just no way. And so as he's like sort of freaking out, he notices that the devil look sort of fades away, and there are a couple of his spirit friends that are in love, laughing sort of at him and not the life that he had. And as he's remembering and he's coming more out of that life, and seeing them helps him to realize who he really is. He recognized his friends and recognized that there's no devil. I just spent an entire adult life teaching people the fear of God and the fear of the devil, and there's not that. And so they had a good laugh over it. That was just the fun, playful way for them to tease him in a sense that, oh, look, you really fell into the belief that this was real. And here, look, we're just going to make it fade away so you can remember. And now he did remember. That just isn't a thing. So it's nice to know that we have humor in non-physical. They describe it as it's not a losing of life force when we leave our physical experience here, but a greater uniting with the divine, the oneness, the all of creation. And the way we transit from our focus here to our non-physical focus is, of course, different for every single soul. And it meets how they can most have it and how they can most relate, what would be most useful for them as they switch or unfocus from here and re-emerge into that full physical or non-physical, rather, focus. Some of them described it as we sort of withdraw through the head of the body, which would make sense if you know chakras. They feel the summoning. They feel a gentle, loving summoning. And then his work describes that there are what he sort of narrowed down to 3 basic types of meetings that happen after that. Some are met by a guide only, and this would be your main guide that's with you through your life experience and knows everything about you. It's a quiet, meaningful encounter. So just getting reoriented. And then another type is being met by a guide and your loved ones that you knew from here. And they say that sometimes they feel that the guide is there, although they can't necessarily, see the energy of that guide. And this is all orchestrated to help reorient, to kind of get your head back on, so to speak. So it's a variety of scenes. It's sometimes one other person, sometimes several others, like the jokesters that welcome the preacher back after the preacher experience. It can be anything from just a loving enveloping back in to a, haha, that was a funny one you just had. And then the third type that he came across was the souls who were met by no one. There's no need for it. He said he describes them as more mature or very mature, experienced souls that just don't need the help. They're kind of in a hurry to get back. They are happy to be back. They don't need all of that easing back into the complete non-physical experience. And then a lot of them described after that, you go to this place that they called like the healing place. It's pure, positive, warm, bright energy. It's like a liquid energy, but it's not wet. You're soothed. You're being sort of washed of a lot of the denser energies, the tiredness you might have had here, the hurts, the difficulties. A lot of that, what we call negative stuff, is just releasing. And then they say there's a quiet place with the guide. Now that we're reoriented and we've shaken off the juju, we can sort of debrief. We can just have a gathering with our main teacher, our main guide that loves us and is literally guiding us. They know us fully and love us unconditionally. You can't hide anything from any of them. And it's funny because we're still, in some cases, earth-oriented enough that these meetings can take place like in a familiar, physical, earth-like environment. That can be recreated just to help your comfort level in this little counseling meeting session. And it's all done in love and openness. And then from there, they say that we are becoming re-aware of our main group of souls, our learning friends, so to speak. So they say that we have this group of anywhere from, they came up with like 3 to 25 souls. The average is about 15 in a primary inner circle cluster or group. And then there's a secondary group that can be over 1,000 souls that you are associated with, but not as close to and not as commonly found with as you are your primary group. So you become more aware of your primary group. It's a very happy, comforting re-awareness. They even say you can tell who's partially focused in a human experience and who's not, because again, we don't leave anywhere and we don't focus all of our attention here, just a fraction of it. So the rest of it is still there, attentive and able to function, which is nice to know because if somebody you love is reincarnated and then you pass, it's not like they're not going to be there. And so they say that we reorient with that cluster group, that main primary cluster group, for just a little brief period. And then we meet with what some of them called a council of elders, maybe 3 to 7 beings. And we talk. Our guide comes with us most often or most likely, depending on where we're at in our development. And we can speak very freely. We talk about our return. We talk about the life, the activities that we had, how we did with that life experience. A lot of the process of what happens here is blocked in hypnosis, so we don't get a whole lot of feedback on it. I guess we're just not quite ready for that yet. But your guide does support you, helps you understand the process, helps explain some of the situations you might have gotten yourself into. You all take a look at how maybe things could have been a little better, more freeing for you, whatever the case may be. And you're always treated fairly in that. It's not a meeting with the elders and, we're all equal. No matter what our stage of development is, we're still lovingly equal. And as far as the primary, secondary group goes, they say that we can be closer to a few of the people in our primary group than we are to all of the rest of them, which may explain soulmate kind of thing. And we're all learning and expanding in different ways, but we are together because we sort of match or relate. They say we play, we have fun together, we play tricks even on each other. We have speakers that come, we have comics and storytellers, we dance, we play games, we visit other worlds, and we will definitely get into that one. We visit other places just in non-physical even. We recreate items and scenes and structures from our physical lives. We have parties. I mean, again, these are all human words that we're putting on this, but that gives you the idea that there's a lot going on and a lot of fun, a lot of options, and a lot of non-serious stuff. Because if there's one thing the other side tells us over and over again is humans have a big tendency to take things very seriously. And there's nothing serious going on anywhere, even though it does seem like that through our perspective sometimes. They describe a library that has large books with live pictures. They call them life books. And they say we can think of what we want to see, and a crystal in the book allows us to see in miniature our past lives and alternatives that we could have taken or enjoyed or chosen. We help each other. Sometimes we help younger groups or older groups come and help ours until at some point we really don't need it anymore. But it's here in this wonderful environment that we stay focus-wise, because we're not physical, learn and grow and expand between lives. And we'll get into shortly how there are other places that we can choose to go to. They talk about other things and other experiences in non-physical that we can enjoy, and they also talk about other physical options that we have other than this particular planet. They also speak of new souls and how new souls are nurtured and have a just awareness at first. And then they're assigned to their soul support group of similar personality types, expression, desires. There's a similarity to each of these souls that comes into a cluster or a group. And then we learn together. And we can even, if we're learning things that are more specific to us, we can learn outside of our group while still being in our group. They say the spirit world is a place of pure thought, powerful mental force directing everything in uncanny harmony. And I think it's interesting because there is talk, again, human translation, but there is talk of place to place, which could indicate time and space, but we're told it's a totally different concept than what we know here. They describe it as no time and no space, and everything happening at the same time. That's a little bit of a challenge for us to wrap our brains around. They also tell us that no one is a stranger. There's no hostility at all. There's trust, oneness, even with those souls you haven't had experiences with. And there are things that we're trying to expand about, or we're wanting to gain experience about especially when we come into physical lives. One of Dr. Newton's clients said that he hadn't been able to conquer envy in a human experience for 850 years over 850 years of numerous lives. So over that span of time, anytime that person came into a physical experience was having a hard time shaking envy, but had very little trouble overcoming bigotry. And they say in spirit, we're amused at how serious we take physical life and the drama we make of it. And they say that although you really can't hide anything, we do have private conversations for intimacy, and we do that by some sort of energetic touch. So electrical sound impulses pass between them, or between maybe two souls, as private thoughts. But that's about as much information as they could get on it. We found that we can only get so far with some of the questions we ask. Some answers are just not to be told yet. When asked if we look into each other's eyes in spirit, the response is sort of, but different. You see the mind behind what we take to be eyes. Like on Earth, when you look into a certain person's eyes on ground, in a physical, even people you just met, and you see a light you've known before. As humans, you don't know why, but your soul remembers. And most of us, maybe all of us, have had that experience where you meet somebody and you just think, I know you. I've never met you before, but I know you. And that's what they mean about the soul remembers. So let's talk about some of those other worlds. He notes in his book that we know our own galaxy has over 200 billion stars within a universe currently speculated at 100 billion galaxies. If only a small fraction of 1% of the stars in our galaxy had planets with intelligent life useful to souls, that number would still be in the millions. So here are a couple examples of the other worlds that some of them talked about. One is a paradise planet with few people and a quieter, simpler version of Earth, not in our universe, but closer to Earth than many planets in our galaxy. Another talked of a humid jungle world with a night sky so densely packed with stars that there were no dark lanes between the stars. One spoke of being like a little, just sort of energy flying in an alien environment on a dying world where it was hard to breathe. Another was being a fish-like intelligent being in a beautiful water world, and they said there was a surface to the water. Another water world was explained as being very warm and clear because there were 3 suns. The total lack of darkness underwater was comforting, and they said made building our dwellings much easier. There was talk of a pastel world, living among a race of small, thickly set beings that are thoughtful but somber, with tiny chalk-white faces that never smiled. That person said, without human laughter and physical flexibility, I was out of sync and made little progress. There was one they called Jaspir, a world nowhere near Earth, in a double star system orbiting a hot yellow star nearby, with a dull red larger star much further away. They said it was a bit larger than Earth, but has smaller oceans, semi-tropical with 4 moons. This person said 6 of us have been assigned to work with some senior design masters to deal with this world where runaway vegetation has threatened the food supply of small land animals. The thick vines grow so fast it kills those plants needed for the food supply. There's little space left for land creatures to graze. We will create an animal which will eat the vines. The animal is called the ranuncula and is made by creating a mutation from an existing small 4-footed animal and accelerating its growth. We make it so its evolutionary change takes place in 1 generation, about 50 Earth years. To us, it seems like a day, they said. So that's a good example of when they say, we're way ahead of you on everything, right? So there was an adjustment that could benefit that planet, and Source was on it, right? Took care of it, which is always the case everywhere. Another explained the world without ego. They said it was a place of learning to be. Newly created souls go here to learn who they are. They're kind of given an identity there. The new soul is pure energy with no real self yet. This world provides you with a signature. This is where the soul is offered meaning to its existence. The idea has never come into its consciousness before. And there seems to be some knowledge about new soul creation and then growth and expansion. In his book, he mentions, I think it's 5 different levels that souls will expand through. Something about all of that just seemed a little off to me, so I'm not going to go through that part of it. And I know people talk about ascended masters and different things like that. I'm sure there's all of that expansion. I'm not quite sure we have the right beat on it yet, though. So yes, there's some indication that new souls are created, and there is some indication that after a certain expansion, we go back into the hole. And then maybe that's why more are created anew, and because everything has to constantly expand and change for eternity to be eternity. So it's all of consciousness expanding through its own experiential learning. Another world they called Arnth, A-R-N-T-H. They said we're alone a lot more here. We're like balls of cotton candy moving on waves of gas where nothing is solid. The swirling around each other is orgasmic. And the next one, the last one I'll share with you is Justa. They describe it as a fire world, volcanic atmosphere. We can experience the physical and emotional stimulation of becoming intelligent molecules of flame. That person said, I sometimes go here between human incarnations. That's why I love to be in temperatures above 100 degrees on Earth. So they do speak of multiple lives. I mean, we can pick to come into more than one Earth carnation if we want to, and probably other places as well. So at some point, most souls, not all souls, but some souls will decide it's time for another physical life experience here on Earth. And when we ask, well, can we pre-pave the life? Abraham says, you are. You're doing it collectively and globally. So again, creation is way out ahead of us on everything. So even if we've had a really tough life here, we see the benefit of it. We see the expansion of it. And once we're refreshed and re-energized and all of that stuff, we oftentimes want to do it again. We want to come back in and try a different experience. It reminds me of my first pregnancy. Childbirth wasn't an easy thing. I mean, it was easy in the fact that it took care of itself. But I remember thinking, how did I ever get myself into this? And I am never doing this again. And then it was over, and I saw my daughter, and I thought, okay, I would absolutely do this again. So from that perspective, we see the benefit. We see why we want to expand. Coming here and learning through physical means is a more rapid form of expansion and growth, and it gives us a knowing that we can't really get otherwise. So we plan with others, and then we ask ourselves, am I ready for a new physical life? And what specific, people call them lessons, but I don't really like that word. It's not like that, but we'll use that for lack of a better word. What specific lessons or expansions of experience do I want to undertake in this next incarnation? And where should I go? Who shall I be? So we plan, we receive suggestions from guides and others. We take things into consideration that would be for our benefit, and we see we know we have options. And as far as not coming versus coming into physical, one of them said, if you lose having direct experience, you miss a great deal. Without life in a body, our studies would just take longer. And again, studies, how about expansion? That's a better word. Lives give us satisfaction. It would be like hearing about something, but not knowing it by experience. I think that's a good way to explain it. So then once we've made the decision and we've put some planning into it, they say we go to a place, or we become aware of a place of life selection. This is where we really specifically decide when and where and who will be. We're allowed to see different scenarios. We're allowed to see different bodies, different choices for a next life for us. And we decide which body, which family, which scenario, personality, parameters of challenges we might face. They say none of it is forced on us. We pick. And so once we have seen the different scenarios, we've played around with different aspects of that life versus that life versus that life, and we've made our decision, we're good. We understand that now part of our focus is going to head in that direction, and we're going to have that life. And I want to read briefly in his book, Journey of Souls. He's talking with a person who was at one point a Viking, very physical, powerful life experience, and had some other life experiences, and then decided to pick a life or a body that would be crippled. So he says, in your history of body choices, why did you wait 1,000 years between being a physically strong man and then going to a crippled woman? And the person said, well, of course I developed a better sense of who I was during the lives in between. I chose to be crippled to gain intellectual concentration. He says, you chose a broken body for this? And the person said, yes. You see, being unable to walk made me read and study more. I developed my mind, and I listened to my mind. I learned to communicate well and to write with skill because I wasn't distracted. I was always in bed. And he said, was any characteristic about your soul particularly evident in both Ashley was a crippled girl, and Leth, the Viking? That part of me which craves fiery expression was in both bodies. And he said, tell me how you decided on this particular damaged body. And the person said, I picked a family in a well-established, settled part of America. I wanted a place with libraries and to be taken care of by loving parents so I could devote myself to scholarship. I constantly wrote to many unhappy people and became a good teacher. And he said, as Ashley, what did you do for this loving family who took care of you? And the person said, it always works two ways. I chose this family because they needed the intensity of love with someone to totally depend upon them all their lives. We were very close as a family because they were lonely before I was born. I came late as their only child. They wanted a daughter who would not marry and would not leave them to be lonely again. And he said, so it was a trade-off. And the person said, most definitely. And he said, so let's track this back to the place of life selection. When your soul first saw Ashley's life, did you see the details of your carriage accident then? And the person said, of course. But it wasn't an accident. It was supposed to happen. And Dr. Newton said, once you came to Earth, was the responsibility for the fall your soul's mind or Ashley's biological mind? And the person said, we worked in unison. She was going to be fooling with the carriage door handle, and I capitalized on that. And he says, tell me what was going through your soul mind in the life selection room when you saw the scene of Ashley falling and being injured. And the person said, I thought about how this crippled body could be put to good use. I had some other choices for body injuries, but I preferred this one because I didn't want to have the capability for much movement. So she goes on to say, or the person goes on to say, what a good choice that was. And we could easily go, what? Like we would actually pick that? Well, maybe it gives you a little bit of a better understanding as to what we're really going for here. It really is about our expansion. So then they say, once we've picked the details, we're set, we're good to go. We go to a place of recognition. It's sort of like cramming for a final where you're remembering certain details, like a soulmate maybe. When I see the way that person walks, it's going to trigger a memory. I know that person. I'm going to connect with that person. Or something about somebody's eyes, or something about a particular decision or a turning point. So there's certain things that you want to remember that you don't remember that you remember until you remember them here. And then even with that, you don't necessarily know why you're remembering it, but it works. It gets you to where you need to be. At that point, you'll meet with that council of elders, for lack of a better term. And you just go through the rundown. They are making sure that you're really good to go. Any tips or any, support they can offer, they do. And then you drift. Everything blurs, they say. You become aware of being in the mother's body and being a baby. They don't say at what point that happens. And from what I've gathered from everything I've learned, it doesn't happen at conception. It happens much later. And even at that, the soul is in and out, in and out, in and out of that body's total inness. While you're in that body, while your focus is in that body, you're learning the mechanics of the body. You're sensing the environment that you're coming into. You're getting acclimated again. And specifically then to this life experience. So your awareness becomes more intent, more focused, to where now you're really not having as much access to your full awareness as a soul. And how much of that we retain varies by life experience or by soul, by person. And as far as what you've agreed to yourself, really, before you came into this life experience, you intend to follow through on. And they say that, again, we take life too seriously. We think we're screwing it up when we never really are. But we certainly can be making it harder on ourselves than we really need to do. And we're aware of how we might play it out. So even though there are the parameters in certain situations, like Ashley was going to get a crippled body, and she wanted that. Even with all of that, we still have free will exactly how we play it out. So when you're not totally focused here, I think it's amazing. And that's why I'm excited for anybody who completes a physical life experience here. It's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful to be here. While you're here, be here. Enjoy this. It's fun to think about between lives or past lives and all that. It's just fun. It's interesting. We're curious. But all in all, let's be here. This is a beautiful planet. We just adore it and love to drink it up while we're here. So let's do that and get out of the serious stuff. When we can appreciate the here and now, we're enhancing not only the here and now, but we're enhancing everything about what we are gravitating to going forward. You're helping your soul have a better experience here, and you're helping your soul prepave everything after that. So if you've had any near-death experiences, if you've had hypnotherapy experiences that you'd like to talk about, you've channeled some information, translated some information from the other side that you'd like to talk about, email me or call me, text me or whatever. Let me know. Let's talk about these things. I think the more we share experiences like that, the easier it is for everybody to take it easy on this planet. When I was younger, nobody talked about that. You couldn't say near-death experience or you were crazy. You couldn't say, I believe I'm receiving information from the other side without people thinking you were just extreme and probably nuts. But today, we talk about it freely, and it is really feel-good kind of a thing because it's helping everybody to take life less seriously and to not be so afraid by what's happening here on this planet and what could happen when we leave the physical experience. There's a podcast called Next Level Soul Podcast. The host is Alex Ferrari. And I really recommend that. I listened to some of his stuff, and he interviews people who have had near-death experiences or who are translating from the other side or have all kinds of stuff like that. Very interesting to listen to. And you'll really get a sample of how people are taking what's offered and putting their own spin on it, their own interpretation. Not that that's a bad thing, but it definitely shows us the differences between how we receive and what we do with it and what we're ready to do with it. But I would look at it a little more broadly than that. Let's look at the bigger picture of what everybody's saying and take what feels good to you. If it doesn't match you, let it go. So yeah, let me know if there's anything that you've experienced and you just want to send me an email and just have me talk about it on another episode. I'm happy to do that. If you want to converse or maybe even come on here with me, it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, I'm pretty easygoing. There's nothing to be nervous about. If I can put my voice out there, why can't you, right? So, yeah. All right. I wish you the best with everything that life has to offer you. You can find me at mysticaltruths.com.